Hello, and welcome back to the Design Plus podcast. I am your host, Raquel Sands, holistic career and lifestyle guide. And today we're going to talk about the key to everything. I'm trying not to be dramatic, but it is the truth in my perspective. It may not be the key to life, but it is the key to most everything in terms of interactions, having a successful, fulfilling, intentional lifestyle and career, which in this podcast is everything. And that is vulnerability. Vulnerability in all we do, in ourselves. We're going to talk about today what vulnerability is, how it can look like for ourselves, because there are different nuances and phases. Each one of us will show this in our own way, which is perfect. But yeah, let's get into this a little bit, because this is something that, as with all things, takes time, takes patience, takes consideration, again, how we're defining it for ourselves. So, what is vulnerability? What does it mean to expose ourselves in a way, to be naked, to be in some sense without protection, without boundaries or barriers, and how this aspect, this quality of being vulnerable allows, actually magnetizes and brings opportunities and relationships to us, as well as removes relationships and situations from our lives and empowers us. So it's a 3-in-1. It seems counterintuitive to think about how being vulnerable, kind of exposing ourselves and lowering our defenses, is actually a good thing and is actually helpful. But it really is. Because not only does it show us, first and foremost, the most important relationship we can ever have is the one with ourselves. And it shows us who we are, what we want to ourselves. And in doing that, in so doing, we also reveal to others, the people in our lives, personally, in our families, in our friendships, in our romantic relationships, as well as in our careers. So at work, with all the different type of relationships that happen at work, with leadership, with colleagues, mentors, it just has this deepening and widening effect that everyone in our lives can see what we're about, what we stand for, our experiences, our background, our thought process. And then in doing that, it starts to filter. It starts to filter out people who either don't resonate and don't have the same thought process, don't have the same values, priorities. And so it has this wonderful kind of effect of having us work smarter, not harder. Now, I will say that being vulnerable is hard, especially in our society that trains us, teaches us to be hard, to be more protective, more on the defense, more wary of others, more cautious and skeptical. And so there's always these doubts. There's always this, I'm not sure what the other person is thinking. I'm not sure that they have my best interests at heart. I'm not sure I trust them. And that, without us realizing, is a reflection on us. We're not really trusting ourselves. We don't really know ourselves. We're doubting ourselves. And there's a lot of skepticism that starts to build within ourselves that we then start to amplify and embody in all our relationships and the situations that we find ourselves in or create for ourselves. So this is where vulnerability is really this, why I said everything, because it starts from the inside out. It has this reciprocal effect where the outside also affects us, our interior on the inside. And then it just has this wide-ranging effect and ripple effect, I think that's the word I was looking for, into all areas of our lives. Because the more honest and, I guess, naked again, the most vulnerable, right, the most defenseless position that it looks like, right, it appears to be defenseless, but its own defense is being able to filter out and be able to distill so that those people and places and things that don't serve us or aren't in our own alignment, don't match our own values and perceptions, that already gets weeded out. And that is its own defense. And the empowerment piece, the piece of strengthening, which is typically associated with defense, is having, this kind of fighting approach, this kind of skeptical approach, this protective barrier. But that strengthening comes from us knowing who we are and being very clear and being very consistent. So, what does vulnerability look like? What could it feel like for you in your life with your relationships and your work? So let me be vulnerable first and talk about my personal experience and maybe kind of ground this, and maybe you can see yourself or see how something I've done in my past and as I'm doing right now in kind of exposing and being open to sharing about myself. Hopefully all of that demonstrates a little bit of what vulnerability could look like for you. So in a previous job, I was working as a contractor for a tech company. And the team was great. The company was really cool. I really felt, for the first time in the majority of my career, a place where I could grow, a place where I could settle and be there for a while, sustain myself. And in the beginning, the role wasn't ideal because the manager was off on leave. I won't go into too much details because that's not as necessary or needed to the story. And also because of privacy, I try to keep that in mind because the story is about me and not the details of others and gossiping or all of that. So my manager was on leave, and this team dynamic was in such a way that it was more international, globally minded. So I had teammates all over the world. So we had to operate in different time zones in accordance to everyone's different business hours, which added a different element to working together. And I was super new. I mean, I was just a new contractor, couple months in, communications role. And I was struggling with one of my teammates because they thought I needed to get up to speed faster in their timeline. And yet their background or their experience had already been with our manager for 2 years. So they had the opportunity, and we could even say the privilege, to work with the manager and get the guidance and get the direction that is needed to do the job. And I did not, because when I started, I had only, I think, 1 month with the manager, and then they went on to do their leave. So for the majority of the contract, I would be without the manager. And this, it affects a lot, of course, in being able to do the job, because there isn't a clear guide, someone saying what to do, when to do, how to do it, and point in the direction of finding resources and who to network with, who to talk to. Most jobs, all jobs, have some sort of leadership manager role where one can, ask the questions and they get feedback and they're told what to do. So it was a very interesting start to this job. But it created this kind of friction a little bit, because the assumption was being made that I had to learn and behave in kind of the same manner or within the same standards as my other teammate. That is the assumption that this person was making. And it was frustrating. It was frustrating because if I had internalized that and thought, oh my gosh, yeah, that person is so right. What's wrong with me? Why aren't I able to catch up to speed in only 4 or 5 months? If this person can do X, Y, Z, so can I? But I didn't do that. I exposed myself. I was vulnerable. And I'm not saying that in all cases and scenarios, this is the way to go about it. This is why, vulnerability and tuning in with yourself. What does vulnerability feel like to you in your body, in your life? But for me, this was the case, and I felt safe enough, and I felt I was willing and able, and I was willing to risk. Like, all of these different factors go into deciding when and how to be vulnerable. So I had a conversation with my teammate, and I scheduled for 1 hour in a work culture that is usually 15 minutes to 30 minutes meetings. So I knew that I needed to create the time and space for me to be able to be vulnerable and lower my defenses. And I told them, I said, look, I'm struggling with XYZ task for XYZ reason. And this may be viewed as excuses, but for me, this is just the fact. The fact is that I haven't been able to have the opportunity, as you did, to work with the manager. And so a lot of this is not just learning on my own, but trying to figure out where to find the resources and create my own schedule, create my own routine, and network on my own. And so everything is kind of doubled or tripled in effort, in magnitude, because of that lack of leadership or support during this time. So it is, while someone can say, why aren't you catching up? Or you should be able to. Well, but that's not me. I am not as fast in some areas. I definitely have my strengths and some perceived weaknesses. But just because that may be the case, it doesn't diminish the facts of the situation. And if we can be a little more empathetic or understanding, how can we develop more harmony, more trust in our work relationship, so that you feel that I'm able to learn and do the things that you see fit, but also I feel that I'm feeling supported and etc. Which I should just call out. I talk about in an episode called Reciprocity. So if all of this kind of interests you as well, I have an episode on emotions at work and another one on reciprocity. Okay. So I said all of those things to this person, and in the moment it's super uncomfortable. I'm not gonna lie. Being vulnerable is uncomfortable. It just comes with the deal. I mean, in a movie, like in an action movie or something, when the person has to lay down their arms, their guns, their weapons, it's scary because they are at the disposition of the other person, and they're putting some amount of trust and some amount of safety. They have to feel some safety in themselves and their bodies, and they have to feel some amount of trust or respect so that they're able to go about whatever interaction or conversation they need to be having. So it's super uncomfortable. And I didn't practice what I was saying, but I had a gist of what I wanted to say and what I really wanted to come across, so that it wasn't attacking, it wasn't diminishing this other person's feelings, it wasn't kind of putting us against each other. So vulnerability is being able to hold space for ourselves and honor our feelings in the face of others, in the face of difficult situations. And it also is holding space for this other person, the situation. And it serves as like a healing balm. It serves as like, you know what? We need to clean this closet. We need to get under, the couch and dust, out with the old. Something here has been dredging up, clotting, polluting this environment, this work culture. So we need to really address this. And it's said, hopefully, in a courteous, respectful, sincere way, sincere for yourself, because you're honoring yourself and you're taking care of yourself. It's not that you let down your guard and then, we just start flailing about or crying or attacking the other person. No, there is a groundedness, a clarity. For me, what image comes up for me is in some of these action movies, maybe like Braveheart or Gladiator 300, very specific ones, I guess. But there's always this moment where the general or the protagonist, whoever it is, they have this kind of speech where they try to talk to everyone, talk to the whole army, and speak what's the situation, that we're gonna die, we might die, but in that moment also exposing their feelings, their sentiment, their pride, and it's said in a respectful, reciprocal way. So I'm not saying that in being vulnerable you're going off to march in some battle. It might feel that way, actually, because we're not taught how to have vulnerable conversations, how to expose and express, bring awareness to our feelings and our thoughts. We're not taught that. We're taught to either endure it, to suck it up, to close the door, to protect ourselves. I think even in the theory of evolution, the survival of the fittest, only the fittest. But even then, that's a misnomer, because it's not necessarily the fittest. It's the ones who are able to adapt, the ones who are able to be vulnerable and change and expose themselves. Because the only way we can adapt is to be able to kind of confront, okay, there's this thing that has to be met. I have to be able to accept and be true that, in this job, I'm not able to get up to speed. Going back to my work example, I should say, I wasn't able to get up to speed in the way, but if I could adapt and this person was also willing to adapt, then we could both survive. And I could survive in a new way, and I can find out what needs to be worked on while addressing and honoring, again, in a respectful way, my truth, the feelings in that moment. So this is how vulnerability might look like. But again, this is a very specific example. This is not to say that This is how you might expose or speak your truth. And this is not to say that this is the only way. Sometimes it's written, sometimes it's a phone call, sometimes it's a recording. I mean, depending on your specific situation and whether it is a work or a personal or whatever the type of relationship interaction it might be, you start to figure out the best way that feels safe, that feels right for you to be able to let down your guard. Because since that conversation, to kind of follow up and what happened after I exposed my jugular, or in a fight when someone puts down their defenses or drops down their arms, literally, what happened? Well, in my end, I can't speak for the other person, but from my perspective, it ended quite well because we were both able to say some things. This other person was also able to offload and say what was on their mind, the things that frustrated them and what they wished could be better and where they were in this journey, in this process, and that they were nervous and scared in certain parts of their role because they had to take on a new amount of responsibility that they didn't want to, that they didn't feel comfortable with. So it allowed for more empathy. It allowed for more transparency, which is, I think, the goal of, or should be the goal of all work environments. Because when there is this transparency, there is this camaraderie, then the work is easier. Then people can really rely on each other, have stronger, better communication. There's not this toxic, underhanded, competitive, and, just negative environment. And then since then, there has been more of I keep my present in past because I'm speaking to you on the present, but this all happened in the past. So since that time, we were able to have more meetings, more collaboration, I could say. We were working more on our different communication styles, and especially taking into effect the time zones where this person was in a different country than I was. And so it just really fostered more teammanship, more transparency, as I said. And there wasn't this pressure. There wasn't this two different pressures or assumptions going on. So I think that the work itself and then the work culture benefited. My relationship with this person benefited, and I would hope that they felt the same. So I am a full practitioner, believer of vulnerability, because in being vulnerable, it is scary, I admit that, and especially when we're in a new environment, when we're developing new relationships, we don't know how we're going to come across. We're kind of testing the waters. We're kind of figuring things out, which is okay, as it should be. But that doesn't mean that we withhold ourselves or we change ourselves for the sake of that person, that place, that thing. Because ultimately, all the things that we do, all the things that we surround ourselves with are for our benefit, are for meeting our needs. And also, there is the reciprocal element. It is also for someone else's benefit, either our family, our friends, our managers, that work environment benefit. So it is about us, and it's also about more than us. And being vulnerable, while sometimes it's hard to take that first step and have that was my Spanglish. For those of you who didn't hear my other episode, I said that I was gonna start putting some Spanglish because that's is how I normally speak. If you work with me one-on-one, I sometimes put in some Spanish in there. It's just how my brain works. So there you go. So vulnerability is about bravery, is about sometimes taking that first step, being that quote unquote bigger person, because you are prioritizing yourself first and foremost. And then the added benefit or the side benefit or whatever we want to, however we want to label that, is that we're also including and bringing along with us in that journey is the other person, the other environment, whatever it is that we're responding to. So, yeah, vulnerability is hard. It's not something that is taught. It's not something that's advocated for. In my other episode, I talk about emotions and how in the work environment, they say you have to leave emotions at the door, which is stupid because there's no way. We are emotional beings, first and foremost. The biggest part of being human is being emotional and understanding, honoring our emotions, because then we are able to have good conversations, have positive or necessary work discussions, relationship confrontations, whatever we want to call it. So vulnerability is the key. It's the key to everything, as I said, because the more we are accessing ourselves, the more we are in tune and allowing for our feelings and for whatever we need to release and stand for come out, then we are, again, creating that safe space. We are being that quote unquote bigger person, and we are building and shaping the culture and the energy, the environment around us. So I really hope this was helpful. Vulnerability looks and feels differently for each one of us. In some areas of our lives, it's easier than in others, which is understandable. But that's not to say that vulnerability cannot be applied in all areas of our lives. In different measures, but still in all areas of our lives. Because again, it's about being honest with ourselves. It's about checking in with ourselves and really knowing where we're at, what we're feeling, and giving a voice to that, giving a space, honoring it, respecting it. And also, like I said before, understanding that maybe the other person or people, situation, might have similar feelings. And so you're bringing about change that is filtering out either something that no longer serves you all and that can hopefully have a new system, a new process, a new interaction. And so there is a new environment, a new evolution. It's not survival of the fittest, but it's the survival of the adaptable, survival of those who are vulnerable and willing. So if you'd like to work with me on your vulnerability, or you know someone who struggles with this, please refer them to my website, miriamraquelsands.com. I also have an ebook called Remove Toxic Relationships, where I go in depth into this and I take you through the different relationships, personal and professional. I talk also about the environment and how maybe the people, how we ourselves might not be creating a negative space, but sometimes the work culture itself, you know, whoever the leadership or the executives are, they've kind of created a standard for whatever reason. So how can we operate when something does feel beyond our control? And then finally, go back and refer to some of the other episodes I mentioned if you haven't already, or if you would like to share that with others, please go ahead and do so, because my intention with this episode and all the episodes, this podcast, are to bring light, bring insight, to be vulnerable myself, and hopefully have it be of use, of service to others who might be struggling, who haven't done this, would like support or see how it can be done. So yeah, thank you so much. Until the next time, be well.